Hello again. Ooh, that glare is gonna drive me crazy. We're gonna do this sort of movement. All right. Bring my chair. Okay. That is better. Okay. So going on another walk. Trying to lose this depression weight. Torture, depression weight. It's going better now that it's warm out. I don't think the lighting, until I get a scenario, is ever going to do what I want it to do. Oh my God, there's an overhead light. 1 second. Okay, wonderful. So I wanted to come back on. Sorry, it's kind of sad the puppy is not turned around for the video. So I did a video earlier, just like doing an update of myself now that I have subscribers and just trying to form something. And so I want to make sure I do updates because I'm in just so much pain as far as like my heart chakra. So I'll try to ignore it as a poor adaptation. But so anyway, did an update, but I wanted to go more into, because one of the people who logged on, his username is 33vato. We just talked about cartels for a little bit and my Mexican ancestry, and he acknowledged he was also a Mexican American. And so before I got assaulted with a weapon at Fond du Lac, and yes, it was a phone, but it hit me in the head like at an angle, and so I had a huge swelling. I had to go to the hospital for where I fled to before where I'll be transferring to, which should be much better. It's been so bad. My laugh and my smile is because it's been absolute agony and torment on top of what I was already going through. So I did want to, as a regaining power for myself, come back and like present this assignment because it's very relevant, and I want to talk about it because a lot of you should know. I'm mainly talking to, no, I'm always just talking to my Americans because that's who I intend my audience to be. And I'll make it known if I'm not speaking to my Americans. My fellow Americans. So yeah, you've all been poisoned generationally. Today, poison's real bad. And there's been a lot of it. We just built so much wealth on chemistry, so much with biology and pharmacy these past 100 years. So a lot of diseases do just come from there having never been a real check and balance for chemistry and pharmacy and biology. And my family's history in that I wanted to go into a little bit because it's specific and it's something that I can use as evidence to support my accusation and my stance. So I posted it below, and we were just supposed to do an assignment. That was just how I had left the assignment, on just one topic in history. And so I'm like, well, I'm doing the invention of iodine because I'm using school as, as a little bit of catharsis for myself, doing my research on my family's history, and I pay for it, and that's what I wanted to do. So when I took Mesoamerica, I wanted to learn more about my great-grandmother and Merida, and then her life, Native woman in Yucatan, and then a little bit more what that story would be like, because we mainly just have oral history and not a lot that we've been allowed to see as far as the Mexican and even the Swedish Mexican side of history, of our history. So let's just fucking get to it. And again, a lot of people acknowledge, I think the CDC director just stepped down actually, that the COVID vaccines were, caused harm. And those same companies had just had to pay a fine for causing deadly harm with opioid prescriptions. So this is where my point of view is relevant historically. Okay, so I'm going just to the presentation now. So if you want to join me, you can click the link below where my presentation is. I don't know how it looks when it comes up. But we're going to get into iodine. And it's funny because I'm talking about history with somebody at a smoke shop where I was a few weeks ago. Because I said I was there. Partly, I love coming to look at the history. And talked a little bit about I was insulting the sons of Norway because this city had like a Scandinavian country, American Scandinavian heritage like salute, but it was super focused on Norway. And I'm trying to learn more about my Swedish, Swiss ancestry. I get them mixed up. And so I was like, especially because I know that they would have rivalries among themselves. And so it's funny that it's like a major Norwegian like tribute. And I was like, I feel like I didn't see any sort of Swiss or Swede thing like I thought I would for how I feel like things went. So just like just being like, I think it was too Norwegian to be accurate. And so I mentioned to the guy a little bit about like the history, like some of the hidden histories. And so my family's history in pharmacy as far as iodine goes. And the clerk was like, oh, iodine, an essential supplement or whatever he said. And I was like, or is that what they want you to think? Debatable. And we'll get into right now why that's debatable. So my very first paragraph on my slide, I just this is from the NIH, and I did all my sources. I'm pretty sure I did. As I just push this assignment out the fucking door. So sick of just all the lies. Okay, so this is from the NIH, our government's health website, where Fauci worked. Early Chinese, and I have sympathy for him in this context. Early Chinese medical writings in approximately 3600 BC were the first to record the decreases in goiter size upon ingestion of seaweed and burnt sea sponge. So goiters would come up in your throat, and it's from shit in the water. Although iodine was yet to be discovered, these remedies remained effective, and their use continued globally, as was documented in writings by Hippocrates, Galen, Roger, Arnold of Vitanova in later centuries. I want to read all those because for the NIH to specifically cite those people, I want to know what the people in the NIH are so inspired by as far as historical medicine. So that's interesting. Present live. Okay, good. It was all hard to read. Okay, so I'm still on that first slide. Nope, it just... Oh my God. PowerPoint, why won't you let me watch my own slide? I think... Okay, hold on. From beginning. Okay, and it's on a timer. I haven't done a presentation in so long. Okay. Okay, then in later centuries, the discovery of iodine was made incidentally. So 3600 BC, later. The discovery of iodine was made incidentally during the early part of the 1800s. In 1811, French chemist, while extracting sodium salts necessary for the manufacture of gunpowder, Bernard Courtois, French chemist, observed an unusual purple vapor arising from seaweed ash treated with sulfuric acid. Studies of this previously unrecognized substance were continued by a different man, Joseph Louis Gay-Lussac, André Anne Père, Sir Humphrey Davy, and others who didn't want to be named. In 1813, because why would you want people coming after you? In 1813, the first paper, and hey, my people, the ones being told that they need to take all these vitamins and vaccines, and not that any of it's like unfounded, but also because it said and others. We would like a list of everyone involved in the production of the element/supplement that you isolated. Yeah, it's a pretty big deal. There were experiments done on people with it. And others, NIH, who else? So like that's another thing people could demand, because everybody's going to have to get involved in the government. We can't grow, and we wouldn't grow into anything anyone wants to grow into if you just keep pushing forward with just blindly, and you have no idea who's leading you. That can't happen anymore in any real way, because it's the physicists and the chemists and then the socialists at large, not any like somebody who just wants to benefit society socialists, but like the communists, the chemists and the physicists are in charge. So that can't go on. The pharmacists and the biologists. So people do need to start demanding, like, hey, Fauci, NIH. I don't know if he works there anymore. Just pick something to be curious about that you can find evidence on. Heather Mothers. I'm not a mom. I just still would like to be one. So and others. I actually didn't notice that the first time I read it, and I'm glad I did, because I was like, where's my grandpa? And this is a story that my aunt, and none of these people I respect or appreciate because of the way they degraded my humanity, but for the people who they live around, they're still doing their jobs as a physician and public defender, and my aunt, my uncle, my other uncle was in the military and does construction. So these are all oral histories I heard from them. And my grandma had been a English professor, and my other grandpa was a history professor at UC Santa Barbara. And so, yeah, I didn't notice that before. And it says and others. And so that must have been whoever in our lineage there. This is an oral story. all of us, like all my cousins and I, heard growing up. So the iodine and the goiters, which I'll circle back to. So in 1813, the first paper presenting Gay-Lussac was read. So they're studying it, figuring out, what it'll be used for, because this again is the 1800s. America just became a country. Chemistry just became the god of war after 1700. It was quite clear that if you owned the periodic table, you owned the future and control of the world. So they're deciding what to do with iodine, this violet-colored substance. So Gay-Lussac, I guess, inspired. So I'll carry on with the quote from the NIH. Shortly following Gay-Lussac's paper, J.F. Coindent, a physician in Switzerland, published his, that's not my grandfather that I know of. Well, that wasn't his name. No, that wasn't him, but you wouldn't believe what an effect so many chemicals had on the human body. It was like, what? We can isolate this and it's going to affect the human body. God of war. And here we are today. So anyway, and I'm sure so many physicians meant so well. They did. So many truly did. But you only know what you know at the time. And this is what happens when you get ahead of yourself, doctor. So published his observations on iodine. This Swiss physician, Mr. J.F. Coindent. And then he found he was able to decrease the size of his patients' goiters. He doesn't say where he was doing these experiments. A lot of them would go experiment on native populations. Like my grandmother, the capital of Yucatan, had been named after her as far as our oral history goes because of the natives' goiters that were cured. And so this is where it gets interesting, and this is the topic I brought up to Hey Fauci to point out that is against antithetical to the scientific method and really just good medicine as it's meant to be practiced. So in 1852, Adolphe Chatin, a French chemist, so 1852, was the first to publish the hypothesis of population iodine deficiency associated with endemic goiter. So this chemist both had decided that goiters were endemic and that it was because of a deficiency of iodine, not that the water was bad or full of shit, but that there was a deficiency. Or not that there was something in the water, but that there was an endemic. So where's my phone? I'm just going to risk being wrong, but it's that there's always a potential for it and that you're getting it because you're deficient in iodine, not because the input of the water has anything to do with the output of growing a goiter. Again, this is 1852. This one French chemist, so again, and not a physician, I might add, the NIH chooses to point J.F. Coindent as a physician, publishing observations on administering iodine to decrease patient goiter. That's a proper scientific method. I observed, and then I studied it over a length of time, and I produced my thesis that for these patients that had goiters, I administered iodine, and over a period of time, the size decreased. So that proper physician, and that's like 1820s, or in the 18 teens, Mr. John J.F. Coindent of Switzerland. What's very different 30 years later with Adolphe Chatin is that she's not a physician. He or she isn't a physician. And they decided to publish an hypothesis, likely looking for funding, to say that the population as a whole is deficient in iodine and that goiters are actually endemic, so that now human populations have this deficiency. This was, and then 40 years later, this was confirmed by Eugen Baumann, who in 1896 reported the discovery of iodine within the thyroid gland. So here we have a surgeon or somebody who does work on corpses for like embalming or whatever. And I don't know what kind of like overlap that looked like for a surgeon to also be like the coroner. I'm sure that happened a lot, actually. That would make sense. But so this is not scientific, and this is why I love that the NIH posted this. This is completely unethical and an immoral way to practice science. So 40 years later, Eugene Baumann, who had been practicing surgery because he had been studying the thyroid gland, and he had also come across this person's paper. And so he discovers the thyroid gland has this violet, purple, like characteristic to it. So he says, the famous iodine, because when every element was isolated, it was infanticized. Hey, 3-3 Vato. When every element, you inspired me. When every element was isolated, it was immediately like, this is it. This is a hot new thing. For radium in the early 1900s, it was like, oh my God, get yourself a radium. It glows in the dark. It's so cool. And it literally rotted out people's jaws. And then it's another one. I think mercury was like that. It was like, oh my God, like we isolate, like, and that's one that was already isolated, but like the Greeks, like people would play with it in even more modern times. But I want to stick to like more common present day elements. However, you can have some serious issues if you talk too much or if you take too much. If you take too much iodine. Yeah. I don't know. I guess the only other elements I can think of, I'm just thinking of the BBC has a really good documentary on YouTube called Chemistry of Volatile History. And so they talk about, so phosphorus was one of the first ones, and that was the fire when it was exposed to oxygen. And then Prussian blue, because you could get this blue paint, and there was so much money in textile and fabrics and like royal colors, and you could only certain people could wear certain colors. So even for Europeans to like have cochineal, like you had to, I don't think just anybody could wear cochineal. And so when they started getting the fake elements in Europe to replace like the indigo or the insects from afar, they would do that. So Iodine was no different in the mid 1800s. I was like, oh my God, this violet magic. I'm going to become a wizard. Which so many chemists in the 1800s were like, I'm going to become God. God has bestowed upon me magic. I'm a saint. I'm a magician, sort of thing. And that absolutely is still like in medicine today, which is why they can't admit like how fucked they are because they've been so fucked for so long. And it is why things can't advance like they should because there's so much bureaucracy in medicine. But okay, so the point I was pointing out with my presentation, I posted below 3,3 Vato. The paragraph is from the NIH. And so you have it discovered by iodine. You have it discovered by a gunpowder manufacturer. And then it's not really anything people are in America or Europe are looking to invest or make money off of right away. And then it goes to Sir Humphrey Davy and others. And then they just write papers on it. This is a War of 1812 was the year before. So there's not really any money going into it. America's in a real awkward stage. At that point, then you have a physician in Switzerland just saying, hey, I'd done this real study where I observed after administrating it, cure goiters. But then what does happen 40 years later is you have a plan to own the field of pharmacy with any element isolated from the periodic table. And that didn't stop for another 15 years in 1907 with whatever polymer element. I don't really remember. But until about the early 1900s, you have it finished up. So by the mid 1800s, and there's like a lot of the gases, most of the metals, a lot of it filled in. But now you have people planning to control things for centuries is what's being planned. And so the French chemist going this direction, not a physician, said she would take on the role of a physician because she was a chemist and she thought herself so special. So she wrote a hypothesis, again, not a physician, saying that people are deficient in iodine because they have a tendency to be deficient, so that forever, for the millions of people for the next couple centuries to grow, they will need to be dependent on her isolated version of iodine. And then she had a friend that those 40 years later, or it was him who did it, and she never made any money off of it or, controlled any interest. Mr. Eugene Bauman, who in 1896 said, oh, this paper is now valid because here's the surgical evidence. You can see this violet color. And after I take all these dead bodies and mash up their dry thyroid, you can see a bit of the same vapor. I'm sure a lot of bodies were involved because he had to make enough of the element from the thing to prove. I think that's how it happened in 1896. 3,3 Vato, what have you taken too much iodine? Do you know? For me, we're just all like so different chemically and biologically. I'm pretty sure I'm also a stem cell baby in a way. So I know I have there's so much about my genetic makeup that's weird. So to say for me that I have brain fog because of my iodine deficiency is one thing. I will say that I do notice when I don't get enough salts, like in general, and it could be the iodine salt. And I don't know actually how that's different, or it could just be like regular salt. I'll notice like a huge difference. But what I'm getting at is that like this planned bit here. And this is the NIH website showing that progression of iodine, something that's still used in the terms of 1896, saying that you have to have it. And we've proved it in a research where the two people might have never even met, but the latter one went off of a hypothesis she wrote. And it looks like there wasn't even like evidence for that. I don't know. I'm definitely going to get into this a lot more because I want to do in American history, the history of pharmacy and its use as a weapon against the people. Because like I was saying before, 3-3 Vato, Charles Crownholm, the first and second, this is the Swiss or Swedish guy. I don't know. I want to say the Swiss guy. Sorry, it doesn't matter. The point is that he was an extremely cold man. So one of them had, I don't know if it was her grandpa or her dad, that would do rape punishment, and that was common in their culture at the time. So much so that like today, a lot of the people from those same ethnic groups, like other Mexican, Swedish people, don't, and not everybody, but a lot of like the older people, they don't see like child molestation as a problem because they see they got so used to it, and it would be used for punishment. And then they were told you have the freedom in America to treat your kids. They're your kids. So a lot of them took that on in that way. And so did people from other cultures. But he was already a really bad man. So as far as the capital of Yucatan being named after my great-great-grandma and Merida, when they cleaned the water for the natives and fixed their goiters, as far as what and maybe it could have been my grandmother could have been evil or whichever way. I'm going to go for her being more innocent and him being more evil, for simple terms. Because they didn't name it after him. And so I wonder what his plans would have been with the iodine. I think a lot of groups had already been planning biological weapons as they settled in America. And I know for certain, that he wasn't, well, I guess I don't know this for certain anyway, because you really can't judge history till you know enough about it. But I'll use Himalayan salt. Nice. Yeah, I'm interested too when I eventually get to chemistry, I just can enjoy it to study more about like the difference in like salts and stuff. I love kosher salt. I love all kinds of salt, but I love like, like that coarse salt. I think I really like the pink salt and like popcorn. Yeah. Yeah, so as far as I know, though, Charles Crownholm was not a physician. And like I said, he wanted to, on his life, get this treasure. I'm pretty sure he had just enslaved my grandma. I don't know. They could have. And again, this is like a time where like shit's crazy and like you're thinking of like your great grandkids. Like, okay, what after I work for like a while and our family builds, what can it look like for my great grandkids? Because it's just like late 1800s, early 1900s America. So there's not a lot of certainty, but you have a lot of opportunity. So I have no idea what their dynamic was like. But again, my point is that there were a bunch of people choosing to say, and like I have in my presentation farther down, a book by Sam Keaton where he references one of these instances where a chemical group in an American town, I want to say it's Pennsylvania, they come in with this element, this chemical they're working with. Yes, it makes something that the people need and grows their economy. But then everybody in the city gets, not everybody, sorry, a lot of people get Parkinson's disease. And then that same company invents a cure for Parkinson's disease. And that's early 1900s. And the book by Sam Keaton is Disappearing Spoon. And he gives a lot of references. And he's just really funny about it. Like examples of like, so you see how you're poisoning yourself and your children, and then you're getting sick, and then those same people are curing you, and then you're like, why are we losing self-determination, our health, and independent liberty? Because you keep letting yourself be poisoned, and then you keep accepting poison because you keep accepting this authority that's, first of all, not very old at all, and has a huge history of literally causing disease so they can get the credit for curing it. And then Sam Keaton talks a little bit about, I did leave water with lemons in it boiling on the stove. It's okay. The pan will survive, and I'm going to rub the burnt lemon juice right off of it. No, it is actually super fucked up that people trust the medical field as much as they do, and it's people know as an instinct, like government tyrannical America or Americans, it's your job at minimum is to be like, that's tyranny and I'm not going to stand for it at like the minimum. But at the same time, everybody is just like, oh, the medical field, whatever. Oh, Pfizer, whatever. Pharmacy, whatever. And it's like, no, like they're literally have been planning, and are actively committing a genocide against you, their consumer, because you're their test subject, their wealth, and they can't grow in any direction without you. And also, they've been wrong so many times. And if there's anything that needs a check and balance, it's literally just like American pharmacy. And all those people should be elected in. Like any drug that comes in to become a part of Americans' minds and bodies in the millions. One second. I didn't read what you just wrote. I don't know if I will. 1 second. But whatever's going to enter like American bodies as far as pharmacy goes, little babies, all of that should be debated by people who are elected in. Yes, for their expertise, but people need to be like, hold up, wait a second. Are you making me deficient in iodine? Or is my goiter endemic? Or did you just shit in the water then make me buy your product to cure my iodine for my goiter? Or to give me iodine to cure my goiter? All right. 3-3 Vato. I am looking for So these are the ethnicities I don't have. Um, I'm going to assume you're a child. You're an adult and not a child. How old are you, 3-3 Vacha? Are you 33? Anyway, these are the ethnicities that I want that I don't have. I don't have any Italian, any Greek. I would choose Greek over Italian. Certain parts of Africa, you're 22. Okay. Like Congo. Would want a baby with some Congolese. Argentina. Just kidding. I've just had so many bad experiences with Mexican men, and I'm like absolutely in my prejudice right now. Like, where, and then, because I'm trying to like learn about my ancestry, so I'm like looking for like Mexican cousins and stuff like that. The 22-year-old, I accept your comment in kind, not like that I'm for it, but like that's an acceptable way to the sexual content. So you're 22. So I'm so over it where like when like thirst traps or like sexy photos of women come up on my YouTube, I'll like try to like not even look because it's always young women. So I'm older, I'm 30. And the older I get, I like won't even watch like a sex scene in like a movie that I used to watch anymore because it creeps me out so much. Just like all the sexual content. Um, so I'll try to ignore those comments if you make them because it's really just like the fact that I'm on a device that children can be on at any time, even though I say it's like not for kids. And this is what I want to come on to talk about. I just know that that's the reality is you never know if you're actually talking to a kid. And that horrifies me. Yeah. I also like my Aztec for me growing up, and especially when I did psychedelics for the first time. So I don't hallucinate. I did like on LSD, like it was a part of like my world and like the furniture around me, like as far as like visuals, but like mushrooms, like purely was like me talking to my ancestors. And so, because I have that in me, and then I knew because of the family I was surrounded by that they were really bad and evil and wanted to harm my friends that I was doing mushroom with. And so I went from 0 to 100% Aztec really quick. And I know I scared other people. I scared myself because it was just like, and you might understand this. I'm going to assume you have a bit of like Aztec or like Mayan in you because most like Mexicans do. I guess, I don't know if that's correct. I assume that though, like have a little bit of that ancestry in you because we were such a massive empire for so long and we took up like all the way to South America, all the way up to Canada, just huge empire. And so, when I get like angry and like defense of people and like myself, but I'll get like I like see red. But it's more like it frightens me. And so to have a child that's even like a little bit more Chichimeca, I'm gonna look that up. To have a child that's even like a little bit more Aztec, I would be afraid of that gnarliness, but I guess not really, because I kind of really want a gnarly child. Because why would like at this age I just to be gifted that the challenge would just be a more beautiful addition to the gift. Chichimeka. Oh, cool. I really look forward to learning more about that. Um, 3 Vata, do you want to know what I wish I had more of in my diet and that I have to do? Because I like deny myself things that nourish me the most, but I need cactus in my diet. I love cactus. I've only had it a couple times. Okay. Right down in the middle there. Very cool. I look forward to learning more about that, your history there. Very cool. I'll get lost in it. Nopales, is that cactus? Oh, yeah, prickly pear. Oh my gosh, I want to go get a can of some prickly pear juice. I'm gonna do that probably after this. Um, yeah, so thank you for being here with me, uh, 3 Vata, because I want to get better at not letting that story like be all the evidence, but telling my story using what the NIH has on their website, and then just like kind of pointing out things like that in pharmacy, like, can't you see that like you're the, like for SSRIs, for example, like who did they test those on? And then they were like, yeah, just depression. It's one linear thing. And so this drug is going to help with this one linear thing that millions of people experience for completely different reactive reasons. And we're going to sell this same drug in the same way for decades, even though it has like an absolute failure effect. Like 50% of people, I think, claim that SSRIs were just a complete failure for them. It's like, how do we allow that still? How do we allow the hundreds of thousands of Americans to die in opioids and they get a fine? And then they stay in business and sell vaccines for a pandemic the next year. Like, how do people keep getting away with that? And I know what it's like to like want to believe like you are waking up every morning and operating in a world where you're going for the greater good, where what you do is in line or works like in cadence with what physicians and other people do. But at this point, because that mentality has ruled for so long, it's not at all true. And then we just had technically the biggest terrorist attack in American history, since it was a lab leak that our government's admitted to, at least they're being honest. That it's just kind of, I think people just need to bite the bullet on that reality and just like, oh, no, we're a pretty sick population of people who has enough pharmacy and drugs in us to make us feel like we're healthy and fine. But this is no bueno. And yeah, and even if you're in like one of those fields, let's say like, for example, my aunt, because she would go crazy. So Stanford graduated. And this is on the Mexican Swedish side too. And she would just go crazy with wanting to learn every chemical or chemical compound used in daily products or food, any effect that could have on a human body. And she was obsessed with it. And she would talk about that with me when I was very young and through the entire time I knew her. But to think of like physicians who are in that field. And it is really fucked up because the truth then is, okay, well, you have some people who adapted above the poisons. So, for example, in the Sam Keaton book, where it was a city that was exposed to a chemical that gave them Parkinson's disease in a huge numbers. And then that same company invented a cure decades later for Parkinson's disease. So it's likely, and then I'll assume for this point I'm making, that those people who use that chemical for their economy and had to live through it, a lot of them would have adapted above Parkinson's disease. And I don't know if you know any people like that, 3-3 Vato, but I knew a ton of people, especially on my dad's side up north, who would literally be like gasoline, methamphetamine, iron ore, mercury, arsenic laden beans, and they will outlive like the healthiest organic hippie from Santa Cruz, California. So, because it's true, cells will adapt, and chemistry creates incredible change to bodies over time. And so it would be hard to be a physician to say, okay, well, then my practice would have to specifically be with this genetic group that had this exposure and has a tendency to fall victim to these compounds or chemistries. Like that's what it would actually have to be like. So like if I wanted a good medicine for my depression or my PTSD and what it comes from, I would need a specific physician for what reaction actually comes about specifically, that when I get overly sad or just like an onslaught of emotion. So I'm definitely just going to keep pushing for, and I think I will try to just get into office. Because like, God damn it, nothing can move forward and I just cannot stand to watch it. But all of these positions of power over people need to become elected seats. And I did another video on it about what my executive orders would be today. And the FDA and the EPA all need to come down to be elected positions, and they need to be elected from a point of competence. So like you have to, whatever degree is related, and then you could debate and prove merit in, go for it. But then also anything with pharmacy, that all has to be open and debated. And that's something I actually really want to see happen. And because like the asshole that I am, 3-3 Vato, is I'm finally freeing myself, getting away from these people. I'm almost done with my degree. If I can just fucking work and finish, which is what I intend to do, then I'll be done by next December or just in the spring, depending on what I can take in this summer. But anyway, so I'm almost done. And I'm like, how do I want to be like a benefit? And how can I still do like defense of people? Because that's originally when I first started going back to school, like, oh, I healed my brain. I can do math again. I'm going to build this defense weapon because I'm like envisioning like this sort of technology and we have this available. And so then that's definitely a possibility. Why don't we have this grander defense weapon, like also to have something sub-nuclear, but that's not just a missile or a bioweapon or like some like mechanical shit. But then I'm like, no, because we're so fucked and like people are so trespassed upon that I'm at a place where I wouldn't, like if I was so blessed to find a partner, husband, have kids, and then unfortunately meet my end, too soon, I would absolutely haunt my family, definitely my husband, because I feel like there's no way my spirit would feel safe with just the people today being able to get the richest nation with the most potential for any individual citizen off the fucking, it's hovering right now above a sacrificial grave. It's just hovering above lava right now, and people are like, oh, it's fine. The people holding it up have really good plans for us. And I really do worry about, especially because of the lab leak confirmation with fucking COVID. I do worry about the next one with the stuff in Sudan right now. One of the news article just said one of the warring parties has taken over this lab that has a bunch of dormant diseases in it. And I'm like, fuck, those are everywhere. They're everywhere the UN is, right? That's where all the labs are, anywhere the fucking UN put its greedy little fingers. I'm sure some of them were really well intended. Excuse me. But at large, no. And that's just another thing that has to come up. And then even if I don't make my end, if I'm able just to I'm such a coward in that way, I'm so sorry. But to have children and raise them, and when they get older to answer their questions, I'm going to be like, oh, I'm so sorry. I wasn't actively involved in the Congress or the Senate. So you can have a life because what the fuck? Like, where have the adults been? And I'm going to end on this before I go get my Nopales can of cactus juice, if I can find it at the gas station. I apologize right now for all the Spanish I will butcher, by the way, if you are fluent or bilingual, 3-3 Vato, because I will butcher the shit out of Spanish like it's my day job. I wish I spoke it better. I do when I'm around Spanish speaking people, but haven't been for a while. Was just realizing this today, though, that all the people who are in charge, and this makes so much sense while it's nobody's at the helm. And it's we have people who grew up. So let's say the 80s, if you're 70 or older, or 75 or older, let's say you're finding your faith, you're on your way out, you're reconciling with the life you've had. But for everybody else in charge and making decisions on top of others, I'm sure there's a few of the other pushing it to the end there. But we have people then, that means, who grew up in the 60s in charge right now. So people who grew up, in the 50s, the 60s, people who grew up in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and then 2000s is just joining the adult sphere. So if you think about American culture from the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, it's not a lot of seriousness. That's not a lot of understanding what your birthrights meant and how much power you've had this entire time. That's a lot of fuckery. That's a lot of whatever. That's a lot of, we'll accept the consequence. At least we have freedom. That's a lot of just let somebody else do the job. That's a lot of I don't wanna. And then it's what? The age of Scorpio right now? Oh, I like that because, and that's the beauty of Scorpio, and I've only known a few, but I love them all, is they sting when it's appropriate. They're not just lashing out. When they sting, it's meant to mean something. And I think everybody deserves a pretty good sting right about now, a sobering sting. I was mad that I got hit in the face with my roommate with her cell phone. No, in the 80s, 90s was the age of Scorpio. I'm going to actually look that up. I like star stuff. Oh, yeah. And I guess that's another thing with like us Aztecs in the stars. That makes sense. Okay, I'm just reading just on one I chose. Approximately 900 to 720 years prior to the end of the age, during the Scorpio era, a transition occurs that brings to the fore historical developments that leads us into the following age. In the Scorpio era of any age, there is a cycle of death and rebirth. According to astrology, Scorpio rules power, control, death, and rebirth. Most of the power inherent in these institutions and beliefs found in that age die, and seeds are planted to bring forth new discoveries and perceptions that are grounded in the succeeding age. Following the Scorpio era, the sign Sagittarius blossoms into a dynamically emerging new vision. Well, that's cool. That makes sense for the 80s and 90s. So I watch some veteran podcasts. One is Cleared Hot Podcast, and he had another veteran on today named Jack Carr, and he had somebody on not too long ago, and they were just like, they're in their 40s, so they grew up in the 80s, and they just keep raving about the 80s because they feel bad about kids today. And and it's just interesting, and it's also sad, but in a good way, because things like have to change. Things will not and cannot go on this way. And so to think of well, I guess to think of you're saying dark as fuck in the 80s and 90s, like in a way, but when you picture the 80s and 90s, it's just like neon and like things will change. We're in the future. Where's my hovercraft? But I guess very dark for maybe what I'm not thinking of. I don't know. I liked that though about Scorpio rules power, control, death, and rebirth. I'll say every Scorpio I've met definitely is like very comfortable in control. But they don't like stay that way. Like they change over time. And so always fun when astrology kind of lines up that way. Yeah. Yeah, we're all just a bunch of kids right now in America who grew up in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. You're 22, so you're 2000s. I really look forward to hearing more perspectives as I finish up my next couple years for people your age, because it's just such a unique perspective to be at that age, seeing the world change as you are. Oh, cool. Good for you. Do you know, okay, so enlisted Army. Nice. Do you know what kind of job are you looking to do? Like infantry or like a specific thing? Where I am right now, there's a memorial for Iraq. There wasn't one. Well, at least I didn't see it in the city I was just in. Um, and it just makes me wish I knew like more details about it. And I'll have to go and look back myself. And as I take American history again, because when I was 13 when the invasion of Iraq started, and it was just and then the people, my mom, her her boyfriend, I guess at the time, because they waited till I was 18 to get married, which that's a question for the judge to ask, or whoever would ask it. But they would like purposefully play footage that was like really violent, and it was always like American soldiers killing kids, um, and then so I never really like studied the Iraq War because of that news footage that would play. And then I just got into learning a little bit about the Gulf War this past semester. How interesting. If you haven't yet, 3-3 Vato, before you log on next time, like the footage from the Gulf War. So the invasion of Kuwait, August 1st, 1990, happens to be my birthday. And then the bombs over Baghdad, January 1st, 91, in which they're just lighting up the sky because they were saying that they didn't have like the radar to detect if Saddam Hussein had a bomber overhead. And that theme comes up so much these past like 50 years. And it was like, what's the bit with the fucking radar? And so if you haven't watched it, actually, it's just a good podcast. I'm so sorry. I'm not obsessed with it. There's not a lot of good competing with it, and that's because of censorship. That's my statement. But the Cleared Hot podcast just had another. Oh, so maybe he wasn't a veteran, but he was in law enforcement. But he was talking about apparently after World War II, we just have a bunch of subs and nukes all throughout the ocean because we used to have submarines with no radar whatsoever. So whatever the bit with radar is, it blows my mind. So you want to be an SF. I'm going to assume that Special Forces. I don't know what an 18 Bravo or Charlie is. And then the podcast is Cleared Hot Podcast. And he has all kinds of stuff. So it kind of takes a minute if you're looking for like military specific, but he does a really good documenting of where people were on 9/11. And so he has a whole like series in his videos from like 1 to 2 years ago, like 2 to 3, where it's like 9/11, where were you? And he's just a really good like interviewer. So it's like information he gets out about the war has actually been like the utmost to me because I haven't done that much research. And then I came across this podcast. Well, somebody showed me he has a poem. Sorry, the host's name is Andy Stumpf, and he has a poem called excuse me, A Debt That Cannot Be Repaid. And so it was that poem, and then I watched his podcast because of like the way he is as a veteran and the way he talks about like our liberties. And then he has all kinds of people on, but really he has some interesting ones with veterans on there. Let me type it in, and then I'm gonna go on another walk. Had too much coffee, and that's why I have too much energy for this late in the evening. Yeah. Sean Ryan. I haven't watched his. I've I clicked it, like I've seen it come up because I recognize that name. And I'll have to check it out. It would be fun to, if you want to, like, discuss something military in general, especially since you're looking to enlist. That would be cool to do. Let's circle back to that because I want to go get some juice. So thank you for being on with me while I was sharing this thing about pharmaceutical genocide in my family's history that I did report to the FBI in the realm of everything else I had to report. No, maybe I didn't. But then again, maybe that's why they don't want to help me. It makes me bashful to connect with somebody, even though you could be actually just a child I'm talking to, Mr. 33 Vato. But I will assume for the most part that you are who you say you are, because it makes me feel more normal in this time in my life. All right. Well, until next time, my loyal viewer and chatter. Yeah, I'll check out the Sean Ryan show. You check out the Cleared Hot podcast. I love discussing military stuff. So that's fun. Good to know. You have a good night. Thank you very much.